Now here's where it gets juicy for the network engineers.
Anybody could write something similar to what you've written here based on what has been learned so far. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Learning to Code with AI course. So glad to be back with you guys. And I am so excited to have Bryan Dufresne. Correct me how I pronounce your last name.
You got it, Dufresne.
Okay.
Yep.
Working with Mom Brain. We had an idea back last year at last year's Cisco Live to kind of go through some network automation examples, combining the perspectives of me as a developer and Bryan as a network engineer, and just kind of providing the value of sharing like our thought process and how you solve problems with code. So Bryan, before we start, do you just want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Bryan Dufresne. I'm a network engineer at Evotech, basically doing network engineering consulting. And my kind of automation journey really started very kind of in the last few years because of the work that we're doing hardware replacements at, various locations. So we needed to get a lot of data, and turns out automation's a pretty good way to do that.
Yeah. Makes sense. And like I said, I think you're the perfect person here to help people bridge that gap between what they're learning and actually starting to write cool shit. So
Absolutely.
I know that you had an initial example that you thought would be really useful for people to see, and I'm just going to let you go with it and kind of, pick your brain about your thought process.
So, yeah, this is a very, very early first draft. I didn't change anything on this. This is exactly as it was, and it was, found in a folder like 2.5 years ago. I mean, I did put in username and password for this example.
Yeah.
But yeah, the IP addresses really. So initial start, pulled in netmiko, set the username and password, defined switches in this list for some silly reason, and then defined the list again down here. Now here's where it gets juicy for the network engineers. I put a couple of commands in here so that we can get show version and show run. There were a bunch more in here that weren't pertinent, so, I did simplify that down. Then we're grabbing the date, and then the actual main function goes through the list of devices as a for loop. We set the file name to the name of the device according to this label up here, which isn't very, not validating anything. And then I added the name bad discovery since I had a different example. And then kind of from there, create the file, start writing to the file, pretty much line by line through the loop. And then it grabs the show commands. So I'm kind of skipping this part here where it's using netmiko to connect and grab that. But so we write the command that we're sending, we send the command, and then we write the output of that command. And then finally, once it's finished, close the file, print to the screen so we know what the file's called. And that's it.
Love it. So what I love about this script for people who are watching is that, yes, it would be a challenge, but anybody could write something similar to what you've written here based on what has been learned so far. So you can actually start doing some real world stuff. Let's go back up to the top because I just want to point out kind of section by section now, things that we've covered. So I see that you have libraries up here at the top, and then you define your credentials that are being used throughout the script after that. How did you determine what libraries you were going to need to import? And do you typically follow this structure in your script?
So I have to think back. It came from, like I said, a coworker had a script that had netmiko already and was doing something similar. So I tried to recreate that kind of, but customize it, kind of write it more of a way that I understood it at the time. And this ended up being it because my understanding. And so then kind of the order was, from what I read online, Pythonically, you've got you could have your imports right before you need them. I am a PHP, HTML guy. My includes are all at the top. It's like the first thing I do in a file.
I'm the same, honestly. I think it's cleaner.
Yeah. If you're doing something really weird, maybe. But for me, I prefer to just have all my libraries that are going to be in there at the top, because then if I start getting a problem like I am right now with my linter, it's complaining about netmiko. And I know it's because I don't have my virtual environment up, but you can see it right at the top. Okay, well, is it complaining about the library? Is it complaining about one of the methods I'm pulling from the library?
And netmiko, just for anybody watching too, is a library we're covering in level 2. I'm not sure exactly if I'll put this video at the end of level 1 or in level 2, but if we haven't covered it, we're covering it very shortly. Credentials. So how did you get these credentials?
What do you mean?
So you didn't have to like, are you using a certain like admin password, or did you create a special like account you use for automation? Like,
Well, so for this example, I've just got a couple of I got a couple of 9300s that I just threw the account on just to sample pull data, make sure it was right. Typically, I wouldn't put the username and password in the file. I would have it prompt me. But back in the day when I was trying to test it and work with it, this was sitting on a customer environment. So I'd
yep.
pop it in there, run it real quick, go erase it, save it again. And this was just the TACX account that I was using. I mean, it wasn't this admin account. It was a completely separate one. But
Yeah.
yeah, in my head, it's kind of, and I'm sure a lot of other network engineers would probably have done it either like this or with the switches first, because in your head, you have the list of target devices you're going to log into, and then you need to put your credentials in.
Right.
In my head, it was because I'm doing this in batch, I need to specify my credentials first and then specify my targets, which I do later with prompting. But I wasn't, I hadn't learned about prompting for input or using getpass yet.
No, I really like that you made that point about putting the devices first and then the login, because I didn't even think about, oh, well, that's how the workflow would actually go in real life.
Yeah, this is the network engineer brain right here. And that's also how it ended up from, like, I have individual devices, right? Like, so any of my secure CRT people out there, you build your device sessions, and then what do? You go log into them,
Yep.
right? So it's just kind of that. It's close, but there's slightly better ways to do it once you start to understand the Pythonic workflow, or
Yeah.
really just the ability to make it more modular and actually an automation instead of what we have right now, which is a script.
So yeah, so Bryan and I are basically talking about how to organize your script, right? Because we haven't talked about this that much in the course. I've given you a formula for writing the script. Hey, this, then this, then this, just to make things easy. But there is some stylistic flair to how you put together the script. Really, when you're writing something, you want it to be easy for someone else to read, in my opinion, right? You want it to be easy for someone else to read. I think it's easiest when all the libraries together, all the credentials are together, etc. Makes it clean, but obviously everyone has their own opinions on how to do this stuff. And what Bryan's talking about too with the credentials, right, is that this is very common too in developer land, is when you're just writing and testing things, right? Everything's a mess and it's ugly and you don't feel like properly, securely doing things, right? You just need to make sure the thing works first. And so that's kind of what the stage of this script is. He wants to make sure that this script actually runs, it functions, and then later he would go back and he would not put the credentials directly in the code. And again, if we haven't learned about this in the course, it's coming up very shortly how to do that. Talking about your switches here, where you've defined your switch 1 and switch 2, do you want to just kind of walk through a little bit why you wrote them this way?
Yeah, and so this is this is a sanitized version. The one that I pulled actually had a casino that I was working in, had all their devices. Yeah. I think the mentality at the time was that I need to run some of these sometimes and some of these other times. And instead of, again, having input to drive that, my easy thought was, well, I can just change the list. When I need to run it against this or that, I already have to run it at will, right? I have to run it manually. I have to jump in the terminal. So what's the one extra step for right now? Because I'm only really, truly, this script got ran probably a dozen times during its lifetime. And then it got refactored into something less clunky and more reusable as I learned what was, obnoxious to deal with, like editing this, especially as the sites grew from 30 switches to 100 plus.
Right. Again, connecting some dots, SW01 and SW02, right? These are variables where he's defining, it looks like JSON. Is this JSON objects?
Yeah, I think it ends up just being a list of, I think it did come from a JSON.
I know you wrote this a while ago, so
yeah.
I'm asking a lot of in-depth questions, but it looks like JSON objects to me.
Yeah.
I'll correct it in the video if I'm wrong. You can also see that down there for the username and password fields in each of these objects that he's using the variables that he defined above, right? So you define variables in one place and then you continue to reuse them through the script however you need to. And it refers to the values, right? So he puts in username, it's referring to whatever that was up there, admin.
Yeah, right here, right here. Then here and here. And so just a quick, I mean, I'm sure you're going to cover netmiko eventually. This location and this name were both custom choices. Like when we go to the discover, the okay version of this, where I kind of cleaned it up just a pinch, I removed a lot of those unnecessary things just to make it look a little bit cleaner. But really, the only thing you need for netmiko to drive is you need to know what it's like what the device type is. It's driver, basically, what the prompt and how to interact with logging into it. Your host IP and then your username and password.
And what advice would you give to people who like have no idea what they're doing with netmiko, right? So it's just like you kind of grabbed netmiko from someone else you saw using it even though you weren't familiar with it. Someone's probably going to watch this video and be like, okay, now I'm going to use netmiko in my script. Like what are some recommendations for learning about netmiko?
The first one is go look at the documentation. I am not a big, I don't like reading pages of documentation, but I'm pretty sure the way that this repository has been maintained. If you go to this link, there's an examples. And so if you're an old school vibe coder copy and pasting, there's a bunch of examples on there that show the different device types. And if you use any modern IDE, especially a VS Code, and you start using netmiko, the nice thing is if you sort of know some of the functions, it will start calling them out for you. There's a lot of suggestion. There's a lot of autocomplete, and the examples are actually really good because the guy that wrote it, Kirk Byers, I believe his name, he is also a network engineer that learned Python.
Oh, cool.
So he's just, 20, maybe 30 years ahead of us. I don't know.
Just a few years.
Yeah, he just knows what he just picked it up sooner.
And when you talk about these suggestions, right? You're using VS Code as your developer environment or coding environment, and you're talking about GitHub Copilot is providing the suggestions. Is that what you're using?
Yeah, so GitHub Copilot's in here, but I also, like I said, I have Codex, and I'm pretty sure I've got Claude over here. It's just not showing the icon. So I'm not sure which one's giving me.
Navigate between AI coding assistants that are that you're leveraging from within the developer environment. So you'll try to write something, right? Near where the code is. And Copilot will have an educated guess about, it has an educated guess about what each line should be because it has the context of what is around it in the script. It's not always this seamless and beautiful, but it saves you a lot of monotony and tedium.
Yeah, so let's see. There finishes that. There we go. I thought about it. There we go.
Beautiful. And see, that was a lot faster than having to do it manually, maybe forgetting commas and curly braces here and there and trying to troubleshoot, like, why isn't it working? And then realizing hours later that you're missing some punctuation, which is highly annoying.
And then look at this. It's already like, hey, do you want to add it here?
I mean, you guys who are just now starting coding when AI exists have no idea how much easier it is.
We're so spoiled.
Yes, it was so much harder before, but that's okay. Yeah. I'm happy for y'all. And what he's done here too, right? Where like he's replaced username and password with variables, right? You could do that with anything. Like you could do that with, the host, for instance. Like if you don't want IP addresses in your script, right? You could be calling that out from somewhere else too. Like I said, like we're about to learn. So anything that your company does not want in your script, right, can be called from somewhere else.
A big one that again, network engineers, we love our spreadsheets. You can have there's different libraries that'll pull in spreadsheets and make it into a table, and you just run through the table. Hey, I want, this site, this router, this switch. Yeah, it's nice.
Well, and after you, if we go down past command list, so this is your main function where you're running the actual logic, right? Above it, you just kind of set the stage of like, oh, here's all the things we're going to be using in this logic. Mm-hmm. Where you're writing a file, I feel like is something that network engineers also might be doing a lot of. Do you want to? You don't have to like go through super minutely in this, but do you kind of want to go through writing files, or at least how you approached it?
Yeah, so in my automations that I've made so far, and any of my tooling that I've made, a common has been text files, right? Again, thinking back to old school network engineers, whether it's PuTTY, secure CRT, whatever, you're doing something on a customer environment, your own environment, and you know that something could go wrong. A lot of us are turning on logs, right? You're doing a change, you're turning on logs. So this is logging right here, and collecting, like I said, show commands. So what I don't have on here, and we kind of scrolled past it a little bit, but I want to call out. So doing network switch replacements, right? Where you're unplugging all of the patch cables at a switch and then plugging them into a new switch. If you're lucky, those two are side by side. Most of the time, because people like to do the patch panel switch thing, you're pulling the old one out, you're putting the new one in, and you're plugging cables back in. If you've got any type of messy comm room, IDF, IT closet, it's easy to miss a cable. It's easy to
Uh-huh.
miss a device, or they land on the wrong ports. And if whoever you're working with or your network does not have an 802.1x solution and things are still static access VLANs, and you plug a printer into a data port or vice versa, what have you. One of the things that's really bailed us out is the MAC table. So all that story to say, if you know if you want to make sure you don't mess up your cutover, you'd add a show MAC address table, maybe a show IP route if you got OSPF neighbors, right? But that's the type of, so we're collecting this so we have a snapshot in time before we start our change. And then afterwards, we can also have a snapshot in time. So I say all that to say, right, as we're the old school CLI guys and gals, I keep saying guys, I should really be more inclusive. The
Okay.
CLI folks, we're used to turning on logging, making sure we can cover our butts, running the commands we need, and then now we've got the file. Now you can just run it as you start to do your physical cable map, what have you. But the tangent aside, so text files is where I tend to write those things, again, show version, show run, show MAC address table. I do also, now that I've learned more, write a lot of Excel. I use a lot of regular expressions to pull things like serial numbers and iOS version out and put them into tables in Excel, especially as customer deliverables and discovery. But
Right.
so a simple text file is where we're at right now. So again, the way that I name this is probably the way that, maybe it's the way a lot of network engineers that aren't programmers would think about it. I start by, what do I want to call this file? So I wanted to use the device name, which I specify up here as name. So it's a me defined field. In hindsight, this is not a good idea. There's better ways to do this so that you get it programmatically. But,
Mm-hmm.
as a learning step, this could be anything. And this could even be wrong. If I made this 4, but it was actually 3, it's going to be confidently incorrect in the host name and the file printout and
Mm-hmm.
everything. So just want to call that out real quick as there's better ways to do this. But anyway, the order. So we get the name. We append a standard string that just says bad discovery. It originally just said discovery. And then we add the date, because if I run this twice, I don't want to overwrite the file I created earlier. I'm using this to create snapshots in time. And then .text. So once we've established the file name, we open the file, or we open the file name in write mode, and we set that instance of the file being opened as file so that we can easily do this kind of file.write. And then because I'm an old school CLI type, I like to have feedback when things happen. So I make it provide feedback. One of the call outs is where this print statement is does not make any sense. And it should be after we actually establish the connection, which we haven't done yet.
I love how you have all this self-reflection
Oh,
afterward.
yeah.
Like you
Oh,
always
yeah.
go back and you're like, why did I do it this way?
Yeah,
And
not a
this
single exception handled.
and what you're doing here is still using a library. Is it File Writer? I can't remember the name of the library right now.
It's so write is part of the Python standard dictionary, I believe. Write, read, and I think JSON's now part of it too.
Yeah.
And it's just for, just interacting typically with, I think it's not ASCII with ASCII, right?
And same thing, like someone could go to documentation if they didn't know how to interact with this library, or they could use AI.
Right.
Like if they don't understand like what you wrote there with the dot open write mode.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was, one of the things that was in the script. So I kept it, and I just sort of understood that that's what this did. It opened, it would write, it would close. I imagine that there's probably an erase or delete, but I've never messed with that. Yeah. Pretty much just writing and saving. And then again, I had this for identifying a switch in a closet. So I had the closet specified. That's what location would have been here. And then the device name, it made it all uppercase. Again, in hindsight, crazy. Why am I changing it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I left it. Because, we learn. It's nice to see everything in all uppercase, but if that's not how the host name is, I want to see the host name as it is.
You
right?
have to write it bad before you can write it good. Like you have to write it just to work at first, and then you go back and make it pretty or make more sense later.
So there's a good chance this was actually a generative AI ad in hindsight. This could absolutely have been a generative AI ad. Because writing this stuff 2 years ago, generative AI was not great at writing code at the time. It would go find 2 posts and mash them together and give you that, even though it didn't actually work. Two Stack Overflow posts about kind of what you're talking about. Yeah. So another thing that I'm doing that's kind of weird here that I could be doing in the same line is I'm sending a new line. It's what do they call it? This is ANSI. They're the ANSI code. Whatever. Basically, this sends a new line on the text file.
Yeah.
And I could easily have just added it up here as I did, appending to the string. But if I don't put this and it starts writing things just, sequentially and not adding new lines, if I'm looking for a specific piece of information, I want to make sure that it's kind of got my headings and, looks clean. So then we finally actually get to connecting to, we're using netmiko's connect handler to actually establish connection to this information here under the connection. And once we do, then we start the for loop to go through the command list, and then we're writing the command to the file. We actually don't send a new line, so I think this ends up sitting right after it. The output just starts immediately after that. So sort of almost looks like if you were to send a show run, it says show run, and then immediately underneath it starts rolling. And then we send 2 line breaks to make sure everything's spaced out as we go through to get to the next command. And once it's finished, it closes the file up.
For loops, right? We've learned about for loops. If we look at your for device for loop, he is naming device like that could be anything. He could say like for apples in device inventory. It really doesn't matter. That's just what he's going to refer to later, right? And discover inventory, right, is the the list that you created above.
Yeah, right here.
So yeah, he's referring to that list, and he's saying for each whatever he said device in this list, discovery inventory, do this thing, right? So for each one, it's going to start with switch 1, and it's going to do each of the lines in this function. And then it's going to go back up to the top of the function, and it's going to say, hey, are there any more devices in discover inventory? Okay, let's do this. Run this again for switch 2. So that's what he's doing there for that and for the commands, right? It's doing that for each command.
Yeah, we could easily change this word to switch and leave, all of these highlighted instances, we could change to the word switch. If we were referencing the same value, we could just set this to a different, we could just use the value device, but we're getting properties from that device on each line. Think about it kind of like, I always think about it like a spreadsheet. I really do. I think in Excel a lot of times as I'm doing for loops, because, the very top is going to be all the columns, which is what these kind of correlate to: name, location, what have you. And so then I go down, all right, what's column 1? Well, column 1 is going to be the details from switch 1. So then, all right, what's the name of switch 1? And then that's what made loops make sense to me, is thinking about just Excel, just going row by row across whatever the column name is at the top.
Yeah, no, it's a great analogy. So this, right, you've named this script Discover Cisco Bad, right? And
right.
I just want to point out too that like your code, anybody's code, it can always get better, right? That's
right.
You just kind of write things, and sometimes it's not written the way you want because you're in a hurry, because you haven't learned how to do it better yet. There's a million reasons why right, it won't be the final best perfect version of the code. But a lot of times it also doesn't matter if there was a better way to do it, right? As long as you're not introducing like a vulnerability or like the script isn't really slow or whatever, right? A lot of it just comes down to, hey, other people are going to be reading this too, so maybe I should make this look a little better or run or whatever.
Yeah, the only reason I called it bad was by my own grade.
Yeah.
There are a few functional things that, and I kind of called them out on the okay version, that were just kind of incorrect. So that my thoughts are, I'm the type of person that would watch a video like this and be like, oh, I can rewrite this code real quick, cool. Or I can clone this repo, cool. And then I know that there are logically incorrect things here that just because I didn't know better at the time or I wasn't thinking about what if this failed, I'm still going to create a file with a name that doesn't matter. Right. So I didn't know about these things yet because I hadn't made all the mistakes that I've now made in the last 2.5 years of improving through this. Very simple refactor, just a little bit of cleanup.
Do you want to show us what that looked like?
Sure.
Your refactor.
So, I left a lot of the things the same because I wanted to keep it in the spirit of how I wrote it when I wrote it, but I wanted to correct a couple of the things. So, like, to make it simpler for somebody else to recreate. So like this is now actually JSON instead of what it was before with the weird label. It ends up being a real list of dictionaries correctly. And this could easily be moved to a different file, to a CSV or an Excel, what have you, right? Again, command list kept the same in the same spirit, but and I added some comments here, knowing we were going to go through this just in case anybody had real questions. About what was happening on each line. So the main things that I did were I had it connect immediately. So the first thing it does is it connects, and then netmiko has this really cool method or function called find prompt. So when you log into a device, the thing that it prompts you with, the name of it is the prompt, including if you're in privilege exec mode, your # hashtag. For those of you that still like to call it that. And then the greater than symbol. So what we're doing is once we grab the prompt, we remove those so that we just have the pure host name. And then instead of using the arbitrary name that I removed from up here, we're using a real, true, verified host name of the device. And if the device host name ends up blank and you just see discovery.txt in the date, you know that you didn't get a host name, whether it's an exception that didn't get handled correctly or you didn't actually get connected, right? So then we're instead of starting with assumptions, which is kind of what the Cisco bad does, this is starting with truth. It's you're getting the truth from the device, so you're naming it correctly. And it's just a matter of changing the order, and kind of honestly, my thought process is really what it was. It took time to understand the real order of operations as it results to coding versus the workflow that we would follow in real life.
And this refactoring is changing the code without changing its functionality, right? Basically just changing how it looks in the file. I think it'd be a good way to define it. When we refactor too, right? Like there's some agreed upon best practices for the way we do things in code, but a lot of it's also kind of subjective, right? So like Bryan explaining his thought process of why he refactored it the way he did, but somebody else could approach this code and decide that it would look better and refactored in a completely different way. First of all, if you're hung up on what he's written here too, even though this is a quote unquote simpler script, the first time you write something like this, unless you're heavily using AI, it's probably going to be difficult, right? And you're going to forget really basic things, and it is what it is. And similarly, when you want to make your code better or you want to refactor it, that's going to be a little bit subject matter opinion, and that's part of why people share their code with others, right? I could look at Bryan's code and I think, oh well, I would refactor this part of it or do it this way, and vice versa. He would look at my code and see it differently. So it's subjective.
Yeah, absolutely. It really comes down to, as a beginner, I say not ignore the rules. Be aware of the rules, but make it work. And then absolutely use generative AI to look at the code, sanitized, obviously make sure there's nothing sensitive in it, but look at the code and then tell it you're a beginner, tell it what the intent is, ask it what can make it simpler or what can improve it or whatever you care about. If you plan to use this to scale, tell it what you're trying to do and then tell it to give you explanations, right? Keys on how do I do this? How can I improve this? If you prompt it for the answer, it will give you the answer. But if you prompt it for why the answer is the answer, then you're going to get somebody's opinion, the most mathematically statistical correct opinion according to that language model at the time, right? But by getting those opinions, it's the same as if you were to talk to a senior developer. Just like you talk to a human, you take that information, you input it a little bit, take it with a grain of salt. You then use that new information as a launch point to start researching, or now I know the correct word is refactor. Okay, let me Google refactoring. It's just kind of getting the knowledge in a different way. And we all learn differently too, right? Some people need examples, some people need written explanations, some people need video and audio. And it's just using it to explain things to you. I found it's taught me quite a bit.
How much about automation did you learn before you started to write this script, and why did you choose this particular example of doing like a show run and show version?
I so it sort of started because I was working with another engineer, now an architect, that he had some Python scripts to do this stuff or to do some things. So I grabbed them from him, kind of old school, grabbed them off of OneDrive, started looking at them, started trying to figure out what they were doing. And then I think this was my first pass myself. And then as I started to refactor and make it better, Chat GPT and, the generative AI was a lot more involved in helping me out. But the real drive was we were doing a casino. We had, I don't know, it was 30 switches we needed to log into. And I needed the consistency of all the data so that when we're sitting there in the middle of the night with this network offline, if there's a device we're looking for or whatever, we're able to reference what was there.
I think the story is just as important, right? Because we talk a lot about mindset in the course and what actually motivates people to get started and also come over that barrier of theory to actually applying whatever in practice stuff, right? So you mentioned AI.
Sure.
How helpful has AI been in kind of jumpstarting your automation journey? And this is a really vague question, but I just want you to take it wherever you want. What is your relationship with coding with AI or vibe coding today?
Yes, it's a force multiplier if you use it correctly, right? In the very beginning, as I was doing things like this, I was very much I grew up coding, Stack Overflow and just getting code from all sorts of places and trying to assemble something. I've been kind of vibe coding, but the old school way, for a long time. And so generative AI, if used correctly, can help teach you. And then once you understand, can really help guide you. So I'm not a senior developer by any means. But I've been working on a kind of a wrapper for Ansible, for my team, really, so that we can use Ansible in a reusable kind of drop-in play type of. So, we could drop in this Ansible node and do a discovery on this network or that network, and it's consistent. So all the engineers need to do is they load up the container or they, load up the script, they punch in the endpoints or they punch in the network range, the subnet, and it just goes and hits all those devices, so long as the credentials are correct, right? I did that whole thing with kind of generative AI by my side. And I use it integrated into the IDE, but it can really not just help you find mistakes, but it can also help to explain why something doesn't work or why something does work. And if you prompt it correctly and tell it hey, I want to design this so that I'm using classes and I'm using my methods, or I want to reuse. I'll use an example here. If you know the words, right? If you're familiar with them, maybe right here, I want a bunch of equal signs in between the commands,
Mhm.
right? You want to print a bunch of equal signs. You could be like, how could I do this in a more consistent way? See, it knows I want to do it
Yeah.
already. But if you know about things like what a decorator is, you can then ask it like, hey, how would I make this into a decorator? So now it's not just knowing, like, you know what I'm talking about, right? The Python. Yeah. Is it a decorator or decoration? It's decorator, right?
I call it a decorator, but I'm not
Okay.
really big on yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, you could use it, right? But you could turn it into it as long as you know sort of the direction you should be going from a real structural way. It can guide you a little bit. I mean, obviously hallucinations and whatnot, but it starts getting you thinking about what can be.
Yep.
That's my experiences.
I love how you explained that. And I love that you made the connection to Stack Overflow and like, pulling code off the internet or from blogs or whatever, because you're very much right. There was an element of vibe coding that existed before AI came to be, right? And same thing, right? Whether AI was involved or not, we used it as a launching off point to make something work. We would learn about other ways people were solving problems, and yeah, like you said, it's an incredible learning resource. So
Yeah.
you really I really appreciate how you're pulling together all of the things that I'm trying to like, guys. I promise, like AI can be useful and not just a way to generate scripts or apps or whatever that you don't
Right.
actually understand. Last question I want to end this with is, so you've got this initial show run, show version, show MAC address table. Um, what would you do, like if you could choose something to do next with this script, what would you do? Like what's just to help people think through the possibilities?
Well, the first thing I would do for anybody that's like at home cringing that the password's in here, um, yeah, it knows exactly because getpass is almost in everything. So I would import getpass and I would change this right here. Here, we'll comment this out and we'll do instead username and see, it knows what I want.
Yeah, it's so much
And then
easier.
we'll comment this out and then exactly. We're gonna password get pass. So, and then a quick example. I know you've probably done this before, but I don't get to do coding demos that often
And no,
as a
go for it.
beginner.
This is your time.
Uh, so here, and I'll open that. Oh, that doesn't need to be that large. So what I can do is, oh, did I save it? Let's make sure I did that. Python, uh, Python. Is it? Oh, okay, I do have that one. So Python and then discover Cisco will do okay. Oh, gotta go to my virtual environment. Didn't make a
And
virtual
if
environment.
it's not too distracting to explain this while doing this, why do you have a virtual environment? Because I haven't covered this with them.
So I wrote this from my work computer and then cloned it to committed it to a Git repository and pushed it to my GitHub account versus my work GitHub account. And then to make it nice and clean after making sure everything actually did work, I cloned it down so I had a nice, quick, easy environment to demo in, and then I forgot to create my virtual environment. So what I'm doing is I'm going to use Python. You might have Python 3 as your command, or just Py if you like that one. But Python-M in my head, that's always been make. I don't know if that's the correct, so I've never actually
I have
looked
no
into
idea.
it.
Yeah.
But Python-M then is a built-in kind of function, and I like to name my virtual environment .them, so when it creates itself up here, I know exactly what it is. And hey, it wants to use that environment for me. I am about it. But it didn't activate the virtual environment, so I need to now do .them scripts activate, since I'm on a PowerShell-based terminal right now. And then now I can up arrow a couple times, one more, and I can run my script, and it should be grumpy. Oh, it's a brand new one, and I forgot to install netmiko. See, one of those things that I don't have to do that often because I've been using the same jump boxes, and now I spoil myself with containers.
Yeah, right.
So you just forget sometimes. But yeah,
Well, it's nice for
can't
them to
use
get to re-see this too, live,
right.
like repetition.
Yeah, can't use the library if you didn't install it.
Yep.
All right, this time for real. So there it goes. So now it created the files. Uh, and these are real life switches that I have here.
Ooh,
So we got the show version and then our show
beautiful.
run, and it went fast.
Look at
It was
that,
real
folks.
fast.
That was real life coding.
And now, so that was with the username and the password defined in the file.
Mm-hmm.
So security experts everywhere are like, "What are you doing?" Don't worry. Sample environment, not real. Definitely not customer stuff.
If it's any
So now,
consolation, very few developers until recently did any code security, really.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, now that you've got the vaults, your GitHub vault and all that makes it easier to, you get to be lazy with it. You just have GitHub drop in the credentials, right?
Yep.
Your keys. All right. So now that I changed it so that it prompts, it's going to ask us. And so we'll put in admin, and then it's going to ask for the password. And getpass is really cool because it turns off echo on the prompt. So you can type stuff in, but you won't see anything, which is confusing for some people, especially those of you that are pasting your passwords from your password manager. You just have to right click in most of your terminals, right? Unless you're Linux, and then you probably know how to paste, but you're not going to get any output. So don't click multiple times
Uh-huh.
thinking you're going to get it. That's the thing that I've almost locked my
It's the
account
little
out
things.
several times doing that. Yeah. But yeah, and that's it. So got the username and password in, and it ran again. Did it
And these are
not?
your print statements that we're seeing here, right?
Right. Oh, and it did overwrite them because I removed time from it. So it only has the date and not the time. So it's just an overwrite.
But again, that's something else that could be added, right? You learn these things
Right.
as you're going along.
Have it look and check to see, do you already have a file, append a 1 or a 2 and increment as it goes. Yeah. The the whatever you would want to do. You know how sometimes you're looking at an app or you're looking at a website and you're like, why doesn't it just do this?
Uh-huh.
That's the mindset you should bring to the automation you're
Yep.
making. Once you get it built and it does the things you want it to do, look at it and think about stuff you have to do every day for your use case. Check uptime, check version number, check neighbors. If you've got several sites over a WAN and you're checking BGP or OSPF neighbors regularly, why not automate it? Why
Mm-hmm.
not start getting just a show this every morning? Just do it when you log in at first, and then you can start to turn that into a scheduled job. You can start to have it save in GitHub. You can start to have GitHub evaluate if neighbors are missing, and if they are, can send you an email. It's really just about what is a thing that you would love to have a metric on that you don't have a tool to get that metric or that information today. And that's what starts this. Somebody who doesn't have SolarWinds network configuration manager doesn't just have all of their running configs in a excuse me, in like a file in a share drive somewhere, right? They don't always have it backed up. This could be the way you start backing up your configs if you don't have the money for the big fancy tools. So it's really just thinking about what do you need or what would benefit you,
Yes.
and start to figure out how to do it on one device with some Python. Then you figure out how to do it on some more, and then all of them. And then
And,
you're growing.
a lot of people who are watching this now who consider themselves beginners too, I get comments all the time about like, okay, I just learned how to do this, but like, now what? Like, I don't understand what I can do. Right. So as you practice what Bryan's saying, as you practice identifying what you need in your day-to-day job or what could make life easier, what your metrics you're currently not getting, as you start to practice that, you'll start to swing to the other side of things where you'll take a script and you'll want to do 50 things in it, right? Because you have all these ideas of how, and that's also bad, right? Because then you never get to this a state where you just run your script, right? So you do something like Bryan has done typically where you decide what is the minimum amount of stuff I want this script to do? Like what do I need to start with? And then you can continue to add on to it in time, like as makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll try and keep this one brief. One of the use cases that I have for one of our clients is they're enabling and deploying 802.1x as they do standardization. And so, as this is the first time they've turned it on, at the site potentially. So going from maybe non-Cisco gear beforehand to Cisco gear and a full Cisco ICE and .1x integration, we need to be able to, before changing anything on the network, identify all the endpoints. So I have a tool that collects the MAC address from all of the switches. It runs that through a MAC OUI lookup. It searches info blocks to see if that MAC address has a DHCP lease and what that lease is. From that IP address, it'll then go do port lookup to identify, is it potentially a printer or a Windows machine based off of open ports, right? And there's a lot that went into that. But the initial thought was, if anybody's ever seen like the Meraki dashboard, the Meraki dashboard has the client list that has all that information: host name, port, switch, MAC address, MAC manufacturer, so the MAC OUI vendor. And seeing that and then talking to somebody, one of my bosses was like, what if we could make a client dashboard or what if we could get a client dashboard for Aruba switches? Because that's what we're pulling out.
Uh-huh.
And then obviously for the Cisco switches we're moving to. So it was kind of that what if that made me start thinking about, okay, well, Nmap can do this thing and Wireshark has an OUI lookup, and just kind of piecing together, I know how I would do this manually.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started looking at the manual. Is there a library that exists that does Mac vendor OUI lookup?
Exactly.
Is there a library that is already doing Nmap, or is there a library that leverages Nmap, or is there an easier way? Like, I think what I ultimately ended up doing was TCP port scanning, which is handled in Python natively. I didn't know about it until I stumbled upon it, and just piece by piece whittle down the functions. But to your point, that ended up being a 1,600 line monolith.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know better. It's one giant class, but that's a story for another time. Point is, yeah, just knocking the dominoes down. Hey, I need this. Hey, I need this. Hey, I need this. Now generate me a report. And it all starts from an idea of what can make my job easier.
Yep. Bryan, this has been so helpful. Everyone, please leave any questions or comments you have down in the comments. Either me or maybe Bryan. I don't know if you're on YouTube or not. One of us will answer your questions. I'll be on there. Yeah. Bryan, is there a place that people can follow your work? And do you want to share this code with folks?
Yeah, absolutely. You can share it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. As is in the repo, or if you want to fork it into your training.
I will do that. Thank you so much. And do you want people to follow you anywhere? Do you want people to know anything about you? Because I know that you kind of post and do things.
Yeah,
online.
I do some stuff on LinkedIn. It's kind of the main place, and I'm around on other things, but not that active. So LinkedIn's a good place to see me.
It's where you find Bryan. I'll end it here. Thanks again for being here. I hope this was helpful, and see you in the next video.